Whoa, where did we get that? I like it. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the inaugural podcast of Wow, You Made That. Wow, you made that? Wow, you made that. Or WYMT for short. This is a podcast about making stuff, primarily but not exclusively about the entertainment industry. Movies, TV, cable, online stuff, commercial production, things like that. But I'm also going to pull under the umbrella of entertainment things like theme parks, architectural models, theater design. There's a lot of the old handmade entertainment just simply going away. Craftsmen and women, craftspeople of the entertainment industry, and makers and creatives of the handmade everywhere are being pushed out by CGI. Now, they're getting crushed by other things, and I've got nothing against CGI. I got a lot of good friends who are working in CGI, and there are things about it that are amazing. And I wholeheartedly embrace rapid prototype. But there are a lot of people, a lot of good skilled craftsmen and women in this industry making amazing stuff that you've never heard of, and you should. I want to talk about that stuff before it's forgotten to history. That is the point of this podcast. Wow, you made that! Alright, with that out of the way, let's get to our first guest. He's a friend of mine I've known for about 15, 16 years at this point, Enrico Altmann. I first met him in New Deal Studios all those years ago. And we'll get into how he and I met at New Deal later. That's an interesting story that's further on in the interview. Enrico has had a very interesting, exciting life. And enough teasing, let's get right into it. Here we go. We're with Enrico Altmann, also known as the FX Crowd.
Hello.
He's you'll see why he's called that in a minute. We're congratulating too because he's a new U.S. citizen. He's originally from Germany, East Germany.
East Germany, yes.
And why don't you tell us a little of your background of where you were born and raised?
I was born in East Germany in a town called Leipzig, which is about the size of Portland, about 600,000 people. And that's where I grew up the first 18 years until the war came down.
And you've told me in the past that you had very limited access to Western stuff, stories and movies and...
Yes, because most of the models or pop culture items, they were prohibited behind the Iron Curtain, or at least in East Germany they were prohibited. And so a lot of these things either had to be smuggled or we just simply didn't have them, didn't grow up with it. Just saw them on West German TV, but couldn't buy them actually.
But you were fascinated by it because you are also a large collector of posters from that era.
Yes.
Things
Later
like,
I was, yes.
Things like the Sinbad movies and
yes.
sci-fi like
I grew up with those movies. Yeah, that's true. I grew up with one of the first movies I ever saw was Sinbad, Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. And that movie was shown in 1977 as a matinee because the new movie at the time came into the theaters, which was Sinbad's
I don't know
Seventh.
the order.
No, it wasn't Seventh Voyage, but it was the one that came out in 1977. So they would show the older ones in the afternoon, and so the first one I saw was Seventh Voyage from 1958, and that terrified me.
That's great.
Because I was 6 years old.
right, of course.
Couldn't sleep for 3 nights.
Right.
But the funny thing about it is that many years later, in 2004, I went to a book signing of Ray Harryhausen in Hollywood, and I was able to tell him the story, and he found it funny because he didn't even know that his movies were shown behind the Iron Curtain at that time. Wow. Like even in 2004, he didn't know about it.
Right. And do you think the clampdown of East Germany like that, it affected you? You had a strong desire to find out more about the West and the world in general.
Yes, it affected me because I was always fascinated by the US, by the country itself, but also by movies I saw on West German TV and in the movie theaters I mean, even though in those times they were showing American movies, just at a certain ratio. I mean, it had to be 40% Western films, 60% communist films. So to a certain percentage, we saw movies, but we would never see movies like Star Wars because of the licensing fees. And so we were limited. Like I saw, and we would see it also many years later. So not necessarily when they would come out. Right. They would usually come out 5 years after they were run in Western theaters.
Right, right. And
but,
over time, though, you just got it in your head that you were going to get out one way or another.
Yes, with those movies, yeah.
This was before the wall came down.
Yes, way before the wall came down.
Right.
Yeah.
And you...
And we're talking about maybe late 70s. I already thought about it.
Right.
I was 7 years old when I told my parents for the first time I want to live here. I mean, they laughed about it, of course, but I was always fascinated by the movies and what I saw, because the world was also so different. I mean, what you saw in those movies was so different from what I saw in daily life.
Sure.
From the cars to the skyscrapers
Sure.
to anything, really.
Sure.
It was much more alien to me.
Sure.
Almost at the time, and interesting.
And were you also then at that time, or did it come later, your fascination with like the special effects and behind the scenes stuff?
Yes, that started during that time too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still remember seeing the commercials on West German TV or the trailers for Star Wars and for Close Encounters, for instance, and we were not able to see it. We saw the trailers, but we were just as eager to see them, but we never even had the chance at the time. It was way later. It was Easter of 1990 when they were shown on free TV for the first time.
Wow, Star Wars.
Yeah, on TV.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now,
but it was perfect timing too, because in November 89,
yeah.
The wall came down, and only 5 months later they were showing them on TV. So that's when we saw them.
Now back then it was hard for us here in the States to get information. This is like just as Cinefex was starting out. Mm-hmm. It was very hard to find any behind the scenes stuff about special effects. Yeah. So it must have been even harder for you.
There was virtually nothing. We could buy no books or anything about that genre, or how things are done, or were done at the time. And I really didn't know until 1984 when my dad saw that Alien was shown on TV that night, and I was already in bed because I had school the next day. And because of the violence in the movie, they were not showing it like 8 o'clock. They were showing it after 10.
Right.
So they had these restrictions back then, and so I was in bed. He pulled me out and he said, "You gotta see it. You gotta see that." So we saw that, and right after, around midnight, when the movie was over, they showed the making of Alien, and so that was the first time I saw how monster puppets were made, and that there was actually an actor in it, and how it all was done.
That must have blown your mind.
It blew my mind, yes. And also I saw how spaceships were done, because you saw them working on the model makers.
Oh, I see.
And that's when I realized, and they talked about the job as a model maker,
right?
Which also wasn't even familiar with that term.
Yeah.
And so that's when I thought, like, oh yeah, now, I mean, not only do I know where I want to live, but also know what I want to do when I get there. Sure. Yes.
Now.
And I was 13 at the time.
What was the censorship? Did they cut out like the chestburster scene, or was it a lot left in, or?
No, actually, they didn't cut anything out, because
really?
It was shown after 10 o'clock at the time. So, as far as I remember, they kept it all in because it didn't really look unfamiliar when I saw it years later.
Right.
I remembered all of this.
Now, you've said in the past you were scheming your escape before the wall came down.
Yes, we were not only that. Well, before that, we were also smuggling model kits over the border. Because my family was divided.
Awesome.
So I grew up in I belonged to one of 10 million German families who had relatives in the West, which were cut off when the wall was built. And so my aunt, uncle, and great grandma was behind the wall on the other side, on the West German side. And they could, of course, visit us. And at some point, I can't remember when exactly, but I was begging them to give me model kits. Because model kits were also sold in East Germany or behind Iron Curtain. But you could only get like Russian MiG jets and stuff like that. There wasn't really much Western stuff you could get. And the only other way would be to smuggle it over, because the packages were all open, so you couldn't send it by mail.
Right.
You were all checked and opened up and checked, and they would just take it out. So you had to smuggle it in your car, and so they did that with a little piece. Yeah.
Well, what kind of models did they smuggle in?
No, of course the X-wing.
The X-wing, of course.
But it wasn't very. I mean, it was a small kit. It didn't have many parts. It was one of those toys more than a model kit. You know, you had to put it together a little bit, but there were not many parts.
But it was like gold.
Yes, it was gold to me. Yes.
Yeah. Was that the only kit, or were there others?
There were, but I can't remember what else I had. There were some smaller ones. They were never big, because they, of course, were also afraid that they would get checked and it would easily be found. So they tried to keep it as small as possible, so they could easily hide it somewhere behind, inside the door or somewhere. You know.
Well, the X-wing, that's a big one. So.
Yeah, but we could also go to countries like the Czech Republic or Poland, where those model kits were more easily available.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So there was different policies in different communist countries.
So this was just as you were, just a little before you're getting ready to... Tell us about...
Yeah, there was about... I would say there was about the mid-'80s.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So...
You were going to go off to college?
I did not escape. Yeah, I did not... I mean, I did not end up escaping.
There
was no need for it.
Right. You were scheming to escape.
I was scheming not until... I mean, my goal was always to go away and to leave the country, but didn't really think how it could be done. And it wasn't until my time after the boarding school, when I got kicked out of boarding school, that I really didn't like it anymore to live there in that country. But that just happened to be literally months before the wall came down. Right. So I was expelled from boarding school in June 1989. And by August, late August, the protest started in my hometown Leipzig, where I had to go back because I was in boarding school in a different state. And then I moved back to my hometown Leipzig, and that's where the protest started in late August.
Right.
And so a couple of months later, the wall was down, and
when the wall came down,
way was open.
How did you react? What did you do?
So what we did was it like any other day. We didn't really think anything like this could happen on a day, and it was, I believe, on a Thursday. It was definitely a work day because we were all going to work. My brother went to school. I had. I went to work at the time, and when I showed up at my workplace, there were not many people there. Most people didn't come in already because I guess they saw it in the news and they were on their way to the border.
How far, how many hours or miles were you from, kilometers, I guess, from the border?
Without traffic, maybe, I would say 3 hours.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But there was traffic?
It was a small country.
right.
And there was a lot of traffic. I mean, we had millions of cars on those freeways. There were not many what they call transit freeways. To the west, there were only 4 in total in East Germany, and we went to the southern one, to Bavaria, to cross the border, and it took us all the next day.
Right.
Like we came home when nobody was walking anywhere on that Thursday. We went home, and nobody walked there on that day. And then we started packing, making some food, and for the trip.
So you're looking at this as like you're going to go down and explore. You didn't see it as
not leaving the country, no,
right,
just to explore it,
right,
just to see it for ourselves. Because it was so unbelievable.
And so the next day you went.
Yeah, the next day. Early in the morning, we started 5 o'clock in the morning or so, because we thought it would be easier with traffic. Of course, it wasn't. And that was still a time where you had to have a stamp in the passport that you were even eligible to cross the border.
Sure.
Which at the time when we actually crossed the border, they would just wave everybody through. It wasn't even necessary anymore. But we didn't know all that. I mean, you were told you needed that stamp, so we got that stamp. And then went to the
So you went, though, with the idea that this couldn't possibly be happening. You were still a little skeptical. You needed to see it for yourself.
Yes, yeah, we saw it in the news. I mean, we saw the pictures from Berlin when people went through the border. We couldn't still really believe that it was for good.
Right.
You know, we
Right.
just thought, well, maybe it's only for a couple of days, and then we would just check it out better now than later.
So when you realized it was for real and it was going to stick, how long did you stay before you left to start traveling the world? I guess because that's when your travels of the world started, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, it didn't start on that day, but it
No,
started
soon.
in 1990. Yeah, that's
Oh,
when I went to Austria.
so within a year,
Yeah,
several
within a
months.
year.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't have much time and much money at the time,
Yeah,
so
but
I started very small
you
with
were
neighboring
determined.
countries. So the first year in 1990, I went to Hungary and Austria,
Right.
and then came back, and then the next year to Spain, and then further. Then after that, it was already the U.S. 92.
92.
Yeah, summer of 92, I went to the West Coast to do a camping trip with a tour group around the Southwest. And that
Right.
was my first impression
And you
of the
involved
US.
yourself with a tour group to have a job, or when did that come?
Yes, well, that gave me the idea to become a tour guide because I actually
Right.
liked the way they were conducting the tours. And so I kept in contact with my tour guide the years after. And but I didn't have the age yet to become a tour guide. You had to be at least 25.
Wow.
That was for insurance reasons more
Sure.
than anything, because you had to drive the buses
Yeah,
too, and
responsible for
yeah, you had to
people.
be at least 25 in the
Yeah.
US. And so I got an exceptional permit a couple of years later. So I pretty much waited until I was old enough, because in 1992 I was 21, so I still had to wait 4 years.
Right.
But during those 4 years, I was already playing the green card lottery, also trying to get in some other way.
Right.
And when I was old enough, I wasn't quite old enough. In '95, I was 24, was the youngest tour guide at the time. But because I turned 25, the insurance made an exception for me.
I see.
Because that summer I turned 25, so they let me drive, and that's when I started being a
So-
tour guide.
How did you arrive then in Hollywood making models?
Yeah, that's actually pretty funny too. So I did the tours, started in spring of '96, and by summer of '98, I had a tour group which came from Germany. They just graduated their high school, and we just came back from the tour from a 3-week trip in LA, and that was the summer Godzilla came out.
Right.
In '98, and so we saw it at the Mann's Chinese Theater in Hollywood because they
Perfect.
wanted to be there.
That's
There
great.
was they actually wanted to skip the tour, so they didn't even get to see everything
Right.
of the sites because they really wanted to be in that theater and they wanted to see the movie. And so right after that tour, just by coincidence, I was rescheduled for another tour, which would start a couple of days after my tour ended. So normally you would work back to back, but in that case, I had to wait 3 days until my next tour started. And during those 3 days, there was my birthday. And so because some of those people on my tour were still in Santa Monica, they stayed a week longer.
Right.
With a friend, I invited them to my birthday party, and their friend was the personal assistant of Roland Emmerich, which the German
Okay.
director, which
Yeah.
just turned out the Godzilla movie.
Right.
It all happened that summer.
Right.
And I mean, I didn't meet Emmerich, but I met his assistant, and
Sure.
then they introduced me to her, and she told me, "Oh yeah, you're trying to work in Hollywood?" And I was like, "Yeah, I used to have that dream to become a model maker and to work in effects and visual effects." And she said, "Oh, that's funny because we just worked with a company who did the models for our Godzilla movie." And that was HGI, 100 Grad
HGI,
Industries,
which became New Deal Studios.
which later became New Deal. Yes,
Right.
and so she gave me the contact that if I ever wanted to work for them, I could reference her,
Right.
even though I hardly met her
Oh,
or
that's
hardly
great.
knew her. That same year, I also won the green card in the lottery. So it all came together in that
Wow.
1 year. So a few months later, I won it. Actually, no, I already had it in '98 because Yes, 98, in spring of 98, I won the green card, but I didn't have it yet because it's a year-long process
Sure.
before all the paper
Yeah.
stuff is gone. So you win it, but you're not really sure if you actually get it because you have to fulfill certain requirements and you have to do all the paperwork first. That takes a year, so it took me until 99 actually. And so in summer of 99, finally was on another season working for the tour companies and got the green card, and then immediately started looking around in the effects industry.
That's crazy. See, when I met you, you were so, and you still are, you're very positive and you believe in change and you believe you still have hope. And I know a lot of people who don't. And
Yes.
it's hard to fight with your story because it's you've seen the best of it. All right, so you get out to LA. That's 96, 97?
96, spring of
96.
96.
And
First with the work visa.
you
The
get
first
involved
couple
with
years.
HGI Hunter Gratzner Industries.
And that would actually not be in 99. So in 99, I started looking around.
Right.
Went from effects company to effects company, trying to get my foot in the door. And I was still working as a tour guide that year.
Right.
Then after the season ended in late 99, I was working for a limousine company to stay in LA, so I could actually have time to look around and to go to all these companies.
I see.
And during that winter, I met Shannon Gans, which was the CEO of HGI at the time, and contacted her. And they were not very busy in that moment, so they said they would call me. Well, almost everybody told me they would call me. Just leave your resume here. We call you. You know.
Right.
And of course, I would never hear from them again.
Right.
But in that case, it was not true because a couple of months later, in late spring of 2000, I got a phone call from Shannon, which I got in Chicago because I was on a tour. No cell phone at the time, so I just gave them my tour schedule, and if they would know when they would need someone like me for a production assistant, they could just call me wherever the closest city was, or I was in a hotel because it was mostly a camping trip.
Yeah.
So I just happened to be in that hotel, and she called me and said, "We have a job for you. Just finish your tour and come back to LA, and then we get you in."
And what movie was that for? And what was the job?
That my first job or my first movie I worked on was Ghosts of Mars, John Carpenter's Ghosts of Mars. Yes.
That's great. And what did you do?
That happened that summer.
Were you a model maker or a mold guy?
I was a production assistant. So I started as a production assistant because I didn't have any background. I didn't have any, I didn't never went to film school. I didn't have any background. I could hardly show anything. I didn't really have a portfolio or anything. I mean, the pictures I showed them as my portfolio were like photos from like my Legoland models and stuff like that.
Yeah, I had a pretty rough portfolio like that starting out too.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and also I didn't really think of a portfolio. I was told, "Oh, you have to have a portfolio." I was like, "Oh, I just have a couple of pictures that my parents took over the years of the stuff I made, but that's not really a portfolio." But they just sent it over to me real quick, and so I could actually show them something. But yeah, that's how I got in.
I think a lot of us got in at that time like that, based on pure enthusiasm. Because the portfolios were not very good.
I think they saw that I was very, very motivated, and because Shannon actually gave me a tour, and after the tour, I told her, that I think this is what I really want to do in life, and and I think they liked me.
She was the engine behind that company.
Yes,
she was really good,
and she still is.
So, what was the first movie that you actually worked fabricating or mold making?
There wasn't the first movie. There was I think there was actually a music video.
Oh, okay.
It was a rap video or rap star called Cisco, and it was like something with dragon. So we had to. It was actually very similar to Godzilla because it looked almost exactly like that monster, and he was chased through the streets by that monster in that rap video.
Right.
And so we had to do models.
So you worked on models?
Yeah, well, I worked on the molds of that model. Yeah.
See, because I know
you were kind of like at the time I was like sent to wherever there was they needed like help.
Right.
So I was working in almost every department at that time.
That's nice.
The first 2 years, I would say.
You got exposure.
year and a half.
Exposure to a lot of different areas.
Yeah, which was nice too. Yeah, you could see what you liked less, maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I know you.
Because I worked on models too.
Yeah, I know you hate that you're known as a mold guy, because I know you've also worked on model stuff too.
And that has something to do with the fact that at some point I said, actually I like that mold making, because of the things you could do. But it was more like, what I liked about it was the different materials you worked with and the chemistry of it. And because it was also ironic, because I hated chemistry in school. All my life in school, I hated chemistry, and then ended up being surrounded by chemistry every single day.
Right. Let's see here. So have you worked mostly at Leica and New Deal?
Yeah, mostly Leica. The last 7 years or 8 years at Leica, and mostly in LA, mostly at New Deal, but also at scenario design and Fantasy 2 effects.
Oh, wow, okay.
And global entertainment.
Yeah. What did you do at Fantasy?
At Fantasy, I was working on the Expendables.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Doing
a model. We were working on a model for it was the palace, the governor's palace in the movie that gets blown up. Oh, okay. So we had to build a larger scale model and then blew it up. That's cool. Yeah, it was pretty cool.
What are some of the movies that you did at New Deal and elsewhere that you're like real happy about?
That I was really happy about.
Are there any?
Oh yeah.
All of us are so cynical.
No. There are actually quite a few I was really happy to work on. One of them, the number one movie is probably The Aviator.
Right.
Because it had a lot of models in, all large scale, all very interesting, and very different types of models. I mean, we had airplanes, big airplanes, and we had buildings, and what else do we have? Lots of details, lots of props that come with it. And can't remember what else but it was all, and it was a lot of mechanical effects too in that movie.
And that's where I first met you.
Yeah,
was
maybe.
Aviator.
We worked there in 2003, I think, right?
Okay, for 2004.
It came out in 2004, so the year before we worked on it.
Now, do you remember how we met?
No.
Oh, I'll tell you.
Well, I mean, obviously at work, but not exactly.
So, I'd heard that Ian, I knew Ian before, but I'd heard that Ian and Matt were famous for suddenly you'd realize that someone was standing over your shoulder watching you work, and you never know how long they'd been there. Mm. And I'd suddenly realized at one point while I was working on the small Mitchell cameras for the old planes for the Hell's Angels sequence, that there was someone standing over my shoulder. And I turned around slowly expecting to see Ian or Matt. And it was you. and you responded. You didn't say hello. You didn't give me your name or nothing. You said, "Is that going to be molded?" And I laughed because I wanted a copy too. And I said, "Yeah." And you said, "Good." And I said, "Can I get a copy too?" And you said, "I think we can work that out."
Really? I did say that?
Yes, and I knew right then we were going to have a great friendship.
Yeah, I do remember that camera.
It's a great camera. It turned out good. And Lee did a beautiful paint job.
Yes, yeah. On all of the models, yeah.
Yeah, she did. That was a good project for everybody involved.
That was a fun project, and it was also a big and long project. So we all got to know each other on that movie well too.
Right.
It was a large crew. I remember, I think around 70 people or so worked on it.
Right.
At the time.
And it really seemed like for New Deal, every shop has a point at which, like critical mass, something happens that it really becomes a shop. And it seems like on that movie, New Deal really kind of cemented things for itself.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, with its crew and its reputation.
Yeah, that movie and the models we did for League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, that was another big project with 80 people, 6 months, I think 4 months build, 3 months shoot. It was a long shoot of models, especially for models. Right. That was 2 years or a year earlier.
Right. And
we did that.
You guys also did, I wasn't on, but you did Pitch Black or Riddick.
Yeah, Pitch Black was done before my time.
Oh, okay.
The Riddick Chronicles, I think the sequel.
The sequel.
That was done when I was there. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
New Deal did a lot.
They did a lot, yeah. I know that, there were other fun projects too, like Die Hard 4 was a fun project to
Right,
work on
right.
the fighter jets.
Inception.
Inception, definitely one of the big shows and the largest model we ever built.
Yeah. Now,
The bigature, they hate that expression, but we call it
now
the
there was
bigature.
a bit of an accident overnight. One of the cranes,
Yes,
hydraulics let go,
yes.
and it came down and tell me a little bit
Yeah, it
about
was
that.
one of those lifts. We had like 5 or 6 lifts all around that building, all around that model to work on it, and we kept them up, I think, as windbreakers or something.
Overnight.
Yeah, and the hydraulics failed at one night, and it just came down a little bit. But as the basket came down, it hit the model and slowly destroyed the foam, or it was made out of
Overnight.
foam overnight. So when we came, unfortunately, or like I should say, as it typically is in life, it happened on the day before the shoot,
Of course.
the last night before the shoot. And so we had only a couple of hours to fix everything because we were scheduled to shoot in the afternoon. I remember that
Right.
because the sun had to be in a certain angle
Sure.
to match the lighting of the original
So
footage.
you only had a few hours to repair.
Yes. And we were frantically all working on it with like all the lifts we had working all around it to fix the damage on the building.
I can
Or that
only-
hospital complex, that's what it was.
I can only imagine how Ian and Matt flipped out.
Yes, Ian. Yes, yeah. Well, understandably. I mean,
Of course,
we had the camera
yes.
guys. I mean, all the other crews, not just our crew, but
Yeah, right.
everybody was on set
Production.
waiting for us. So
Yeah.
it was a lot of pressure and money involved.
Now, since then, it continues to move more and more into CGI. Yeah? So, what's your opinion of the state of the industry right now? Miniatures and
I
special
would say
effects.
it's definitely declining. I mean, it's no secret.
Right.
But the funny thing is also that when I got in, the first time in around 99, 2000, when I was looking around and went from shop to shop, and there were many more shops still existent back then than today or the years after. Most of the shops told me, "Oh, don't even waste your time on getting to the business, and it's on its way out. It's all going to be CGI, computer graphics in the future. So don't even try to get into the industry. Go get a computer job. Do that.
Right.
Do become a compositor or whatever."
Right.
And but the funny thing is, here we are, 18 years later.
Yeah.
I'm still in the industry,
Right.
and I did my
Well, when did The Abyss come out? Around 91?
in 89.
89, even.
There
earlier.
were, Abyss was one of the first movies we saw, or at least the big movies we saw after the war came down, that came into East German theaters at the same time as in West German theaters.
Right.
It was a big deal back then
I'll
because
bet.
for the first time we didn't have to wait after we saw the trailers for years before we saw a movie.
After that movie came out with the CGI water
Yes.
tentacle, Mark Stetson came through the shop and he said, "It's time for y'all to learn the computer, boys. We're not going to be doing this much longer." And it took longer, I think, than he expected.
Yeah,
but
everybody
has,
expected
it
it
has
took. Yeah.
sunk us. But it
But
took
it
a lot
definitely
longer.
goes into the direction of
Yeah.
CGI.
Yeah.
But what they also could not foresee in the late 80s, early 90s was globalization. So
That
not
too,
only
right.
did the
Yeah.
jobs go away,
Right.
but even the computer jobs or the CGI actually went away too, because it's
Right.
all done in different other countries
Right.
right now.
What do you think of Fury Road and the new Blade Runner trying to do as much in camera as possible?
Yeah, I think it's great, and it
Yeah.
looks great too.
It looks great.
And there are a couple other directors, they still use it a lot, like Christopher Nolan. He just
Right.
almost always uses models in his movies. And we worked on a couple of projects of his. He keeps it alive. It's just a question of if one director is enough to keep it
Well,
alive
that's
as
just
an industry.
Is the young directors and the young producers coming up don't have that experience, so they
Right.
won't think of it.
Yeah, it's not so much that it can be done. It's more like thinking of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it has its place.
But it's good. It definitely has its place, and it's good that there are still directors like Nolan out there who can utilize that and can also show that that is important and,
Right.
and what it can, how good it can make a film look,
And Ridley Scott, but
even at this
he's
day.
ancient, so he's not going to be around
Yes.
much.
No. But I think overall it's gonna go away. It's just a question of time.
So were your parents always supportive of you doing this, or not at first, I bet?
You would think, because it was so ambitious
Right,
at
right.
first. They thought. I mean, they did. As long as I was still in Germany, they did support me, and they never really said. I mean, they knew I wanted to get away, and they were always supportive of that fact that I actually wanted to leave the country and what I wanted to do. But when it actually happened, it's a different matter. When your son is suddenly going away to
Right.
for a
Yes.
country on a different continent,
Right.
and you don't see him anymore. And that was before the internet, so at
Sure.
that time there was no Skype around, nothing.
Right.
So you would really only see each other again when you met the next time.
Right.
So they were not that happy, but in the early years, they knew I would probably come back because I didn't have a green card yet. What changed was the green card. Once I got the green card, then they knew I was going to
serious.
stay here.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was serious. And also they knew that the green card would open up the opportunity to work in the film industry and not in the tourism industry
Right.
anymore.
Are they fans of you doing the special effects? Or?
They do like it now, yes. Yeah. Now that they see my credit in the movies, they like it a lot more.
My dad was very old-fashioned. He wanted me to get a 9-to-5 job. He
Yes,
really didn't
that's exactly what they wanted for me too.
He really didn't understand Hollywood, but after I was out there doing it for 2 or 3 years, and I wasn't asking him for money.
Yes, that's exactly
And then he
it.
started
Yes.
seeing
Very similar.
my credits occasionally.
Yeah.
He became my biggest fan, but
Yeah.
it took a little while.
Well, that and the persistence also, that they saw that you really wanted to do it. It wasn't just
Right.
an idea or like something you wanted to try out. It was really
Yeah.
something you wanted to do for a long time.
Right.
Yeah, they eventually, I guess, they accepted it and then started to like it.
Right, right.
But yeah, they wanted me to have a normal job. They wanted me to have a stable job. That's how
Right.
they called it.
Yeah.
They didn't see it as stable. And in the beginning, it isn't a stable job.
No.
It's very hard to convince your
Well,
parents.
it's still not stable.
When you no, it's not. Yeah, now it's not stable for different reasons. But in the beginning, it wasn't stable because you just start out. You don't know anybody. It's
Right.
harder to get a job. You don't have a reputation yet. Really, you have to work on that.
It's easy in your 20s.
But it's also easier because you don't need much. Yes,
Right.
you don't have many bills.
Now, how did you become? Because I also know you as a poster collector. I brought up. What's that fascination?
That
'Cause
actually-
I know you got quite a few.
Yeah, the posters. Well, that interest came later on when I was exposed for a longer time, when I started working in the film industry, and saw all the posts or other people's collections or things. Just the companies you work with, in
Yeah.
their offices, all the decorations and all that. I think that had something to do with it, and also looking back how it all started with those old movies I saw as a kid when they were came as reruns in the afternoon. And for instance, on German TV they had like a Saturday afternoon movie where they were showing all these old 50s, 60s, and 70s. Well, not so much 70s, but 50s and 60s movies, like that Sinbad movie, for instance.
Right.
And they were frequently shown because they were popular in Germany, in both East and West Germany. And so I thought, like, it would be nice to, now that I work in the industry, it would be nice to have something that connects me to my childhood, to that what started the whole interest,
Right. Now,
like an original piece,
now recently
Yeah.
you got one of your rare posters into a book. Briefly tell us about
Yes.
that. That's
Well, I can't really
fascinating.
tell much about it because the book is not published yet. It will be published this year in 2018, sometime in summer. At least that's what they told me. And it's started, or like it's published by the Harryhausen Foundation in England, and they wanted to make a book about his movies, but particular about the artwork of all these film posters around the world. So the book is basically about Harryhausen movies, but it's really about the artwork of all these artists who, by hand, at the time in the earlier days, drew all these different movie posters, and they do look different in every country. Like a Sinbad poster in America looked totally different, like a one in Germany or in in the Middle East for that
The one
matter.
you showed me that
the one I showed you
brought to work was beautiful. Where was
Yes,
that from?
that was an Egyptian film poster from 1958, hand drawn, or at least like for the print, hand drawn for the print,
It's gorgeous.
by an artist that pretty much did all the posters at the time in Cairo for the Egyptian market, and I got that on eBay in Lebanon. There was
That's
a art deal, not an art dealer, but like a movie memorabilia dealer in Lebanon. And he sold it to me, but it was not in a good condition. I had to restore it first.
Right. And you contacted this guy and sent him a photo?
Oh, yeah, no, that's actually, that's what you wanted to know, actually. So the reason why I knew about the book project was because a friend of mine in LA heard about it, and he posted it on Facebook. There was an article about that book project. And at the end of the article, it said, like, if you happen to know of a poster we might not know, or you think it might be rare, let us know. Send us a snapshot, and we just go through the archives and see if that's one we don't have. And so I thought at the time, that seems pretty rare. I mean, Egyptian poster from 1958. So I just sent him a snapshot. And sure enough, the same day, email came back telling me that, we have not that in our archives, and we would like to include that in our book.
That's awesome.
And that's when I started to give it away to restore it, so they get a nice shot of it.
Right. Have you had that scanned yet?
Yeah, they scan. I scanned it and then sent it over.
Nice.
And
I still want to get a copy of that file, boy.
Yes.
Awesome. We'll try and get a photo of that on the website.
It will be an interesting book, yeah.
Yeah. It's no secret at this point that Leica has laid off most of their staff, and we're all being scattered to the wind. You're going to travel for a while, because that's what you do now. You're a traveler.
Yes, I was planning on it already, because it was the end of the project, end of the film, the last film we all worked on.
And after that, what are you going to do? You're going to head back to Los Angeles?
That's right. After that, I'm planning to move back to Los Angeles and start over again.
Are you going to try and stay in the biz, or are you going to try and do something else?
I think I'm going to try first to stay in the business, but maybe do something else, since our particular work is not so much sought after anymore.
No, sadly.
But yeah, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. I mean, if it's too hard and I can't really get another job in the business, then I'm also thinking about maybe going back into the tourism business.
Right. How was your time at Leica?
It was mixed.
Yeah, that's what I hear.
It's
that's what I say.
It was an interesting time. I don't regret it.
No.
Of course. But I do like Southern California sunshine.
Yeah. No, I do miss that too. No, Leica, people ask me about it, and I say, well, in the 7 years I was there was never a dull moment.
Yes.
It had its ups and downs.
It was not dull.
Like a roller coaster ride. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to say about the visual effects industry that we didn't get to?
I don't know if I can add anything to it.
You've got a storied career just with New Deal.
I'm glad I did make it into. I'm really grateful for all the years I was able to work in that industry.
All right.
Now that I see it going away, I'm really happy about it. I actually became part of it.
Right. Normally, all right, well, I'm just going to say right here, you have a really good account on Instagram called Travel Kraut.
Yes.
Now, kraut is pejorative. It's derogatory, however you want to put it. You've made it your own. You have a license plate on your car that says FX Kraut.
Yeah.
And your Instagram account is Travel Kraut.
Yes.
So why have you adopted Kraut as one of your monikers?
Well, because it was short, everybody knows about it. It's very recognizable, and because some people actually called me the Kraut, like in a funny way, of course, not
friends.
Yeah, on set, yeah. Get me the Kraut, or like, where's the Kraut already? Like, right. So Yeah, that was one of the reasons, and also because license plates have to be short, so there are not many.
Right. So you have a really good Instagram.
Especially when you when you want to have a license plate that includes a German word.
Right.
It's very hard to find one that's short enough,
right.
but still with a meaning.
Yeah. So you have a great Instagram account. Until recently, it was a lot of travel, but you've also branched into doing some behind the scenes footage.
Lately,
shots
I did.
Lately.
Yeah. Because I wasn't traveling much and I had some time, so I did. Because I'm actually working on a project. That's where all these pictures come from. Working on a project for my dad, which I want to make a coffee table book about my work in the industry, and so I'm creating all these photos for that book for my own book.
That's perfect.
I don't want to publish it. It's just something that I want to do for my dad.
So just a couple of them made for you and your family?
Yeah, just a couple made. They're going to be expensive. It's a lot of pages.
We'll see if we can change that. Maybe get a few more made.
But I mean, like my Instagram page is always about traveling and the film industry. Yeah. It's just mostly about traveling. But when I have time or when there are some good pictures, I post them on.
So you're going to keep trying to do from time to time behind the scenes stuff.
Yes. Yeah, behind the scenes. Because people are interested. I mean, they always ask me about how we do that, and they're all interested in seeing it.
Yeah, people love it because I guess it's dying out.
Yeah, well, most people don't really know about that so much, but they're always interested in seeing how it is actually done, and especially when you can show them the scene and then how it looks behind the scenes.
Yeah. For me, Instagram has been awesome because I've had 3 decades worth of photos.
Yeah, you have much more, much more.
Or in a shoebox, and it's like, let's get these out and show them.
Yeah, you can publish photos for the next 10 years, easy.
That's the hope. That's the hope. All right, well, I want to thank Enrico Altmann for joining us today, and you can check him out on Instagram under Travel Kraut. He's got a really good feed. You should check that out. And I'm going to have photos of Enrico and me and maybe a scan of that poster if I can get it out of him on my website. And thank you very much. Thanks, Enrico.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And we made it. We've finished the first episode of Wow, You Made That. I hope you enjoyed Enrico Altmann. He's got a lot of stories. I'm going to try and get him back down the road if I can talk him into doing another one. For a picture of Enrico and me during the recording, check out my website, michaelpossert.com. Michael Possert, Possert.com, michaelpossert.com. I'll have some show notes there as well. And again, that's michaelpossert.com. I want to thank you for listening, and I hope you come back for the next one. Thanks, everybody. See you again.